Hello, everybody at UCFB, and welcome along to another one of our chats, another one of our webinars. And this time we are heading to Manchester City to be more precise, to talk to Abi Withey, who looks after their social media engagement. Abi, welcome to you and welcome to UCFB.
Oh, thank you so much. No, I'm really, really pleased to do this. So thanks for having me.
Can I first of all talk about your university experience?
Yeah,
What
of
did you
course.
have and where'd you go?
Yeah, so I did broadcast journalism. I went to Salford Uni, so that was based up at Media City. So I always knew I wanted to do something in journalism. I knew I wanted to go into sport, but I didn't want to completely box myself off just because I hadn't 100%. I wasn't sure. I was a bit interested in radio and news as well. So I thought it was better for me personally to do something a bit broader. And then in every opportunity that I got to do something in sports, throughout the different years, I then took those opportunities, and then that sort of started to rein my focus in a little bit onto what I wanted to do. So yeah, it was really good. And being up there, as you can tell, I stayed up there. I just loved Manchester personally. So I knew that when I started looking for jobs and bits afterwards that I wanted to stay up in the north.
Did you do anything practically in terms of getting prepared for what you went on to do? Maybe even before you went to uni, did you have a structure in place before you went to uni to do that?
So, I mean, like I say, I knew that I wanted to go into media, definitely. It wasn't until I was at uni that I really was able, because I'm from Norwich originally, and there's not a whole load going on in that sort of respect, the sort of opportunities you have in Manchester and London. So it was when I got to uni that I really started to just get involved in volunteering whenever I could in different bits of media. So I mean, I did random bits for darts, and I have no interest in darts. But again, it was just that the opportunity brought itself. So I went and covered the darts, rugby as well. And just to broaden that, so any opportunity that sort of came up, like, oh, this game's on this weekend, or oh, this person's coming in, I'll just be like, great, can I go along? Just to be there and be around and sort of meet those contacts. So that was when it sort of started at uni to get those sort of connections and that sort of feeling of what I wanted to do.
What you need to do right now is nail your football colours to the mast. So go on, do it. Man City fan?
I'm actually not a Man City fan, but I have a real love for them, obviously, because everything I do day to day, when I wake up in the morning, when I'm going to bed, everything I'm doing is revolving around this team. And so I want them to do well, because obviously you know them, so you just want them to do well anyway. But also it reflects on my work. So I know that I'm going to have more opportunities to create cool content if they're doing well. I'm actually an Arsenal fan, but I think you'd be surprised, because when I went, I was a bit worried about, oh gosh, wonder if people, like, should I tell people that I'm not? But actually, there's such a broad range of supporters work it. We have people that work at City that aren't necessarily football fans, but they're just really creative. Obviously, it helps if you are a football fan. We've got United fans that work with us. There's Chelsea, Liverpool. Like, you honestly would be surprised at how many. Obviously, there's a lot of City fans there that are sort of living out their dream of working for their sort of childhood club. But yeah, I don't think that you have to box yourself off or feel like you can't go to a certain club, unless you obviously have a strong allegiance or thought that I couldn't possibly write about another club or anything like that. But yeah, not originally a City fan, no.
No, but originally you said from Norwich, so why are you not a Canaries fan then?
It's family. My dad is an Arsenal fan. Quite a lot of my family are. I think my cousin's on here now. He's also from Norwich. He does a bit of both, I believe. He's a Norwich fan and an Arsenal fan. But yeah,
Can you be both? Can you be both though?
Well, Ben seems to get along. I personally don't know how, but yeah.
All right. And what happens when they meet? What happens when Arsenal and Manchester City come together twice a year at least? What was do you have to kind of go, this is rather awkward, or is it a joyous occasion for you?
At the beginning, it was strange, because you're having to sort of contain certain emotions that you'd feel if you're at a game. But there was a real distinct difference. I can't stress this enough, that watching a game when you're off work and being able to go to a game as a fan is completely different to covering a game working it, because during the game, you're just focused on what's happening, who's doing what, making sure that the fans that we're focusing on, so City, are getting the content that they need, we're putting out the stuff that reflects our tone of voice, the message we want to get across. So at the beginning, it was difficult in the first sort of season or so when they're meeting, because especially when you're on an Instagram story and you're doing sort of like live updates, that it's quite difficult. But I think it's striking that balance and having that on and off switch to be able to distinguish between being a fan and working in football.
A lot of the students I've spoken to over the last couple of years come in with an idea to uni about what they eventually want to do, and that changes over the course of time, over the 3 years. So as yours evolved, did that evolve as well? I mean, because you're doing a broadcast course, so I imagine you were thinking maybe Sky Sports News or BBC Sport Up and so forth, or something like that. Did that evolve in time, and in which way did it?
Yeah, 100%. That is exactly the frame of mind I went into, particularly in my first year. I was so focused on presenting, and I loved it. And I was like, I want to be a Sky Sports or BBC Sport presenter. That's what I wanted to do. And there was never a point where I was like, so now looking back, I was never like, oh, I would want to be a social media manager at a club. That was never something that I had in my head that was an aim to do. But as I sort of went on, and when I first started at City, so I then went into a lot of writing, and I was doing more sort of written stuff. And then when I went to City, it then came up that there were opportunities to do a little bit presenting alongside the written stuff, because I was working in the content teams. That was for the website. But again, it was just taking those opportunities. So when it was like, oh, we haven't got anyone to go to Palace next week, we need somebody to go and present the Snapchat story it was at the time. And I was just like, right, I'll do it, because I'd done a bit of presenting in uni. And then through that, I then started helping out and with the social team a little bit more. Oh, can someone tweet this game? Yeah, I'll help out with that. Or it was just a case of picking up those opportunities when they arose and not being afraid to step out of because I was an intern, a content intern. So my job title, I was meant to be focusing on the academy, written for the website. But then it was a case of anytime, oh, okay, well, we've got a women's team opportunity here. Yeah, I'd love to work and cover the women's game. Then the presenting, then and it was through taking those opportunities that I then got more involved in the social team. Suddenly found like, oh, actually, I really enjoy this and I'm pretty good at it. Maybe this is the direction I want to move in. Then it just worked out in terms of restructuring of teams that I moved across, and then just worked my way up from there. But I never set out to work in the social team. When I started, it was very much sort of like, oh, written. I thought the presenting stuff had gone. It was just sort of like, oh, that's not going to happen for me. But it happened in just a bit of a different way.
How important then is it not to box yourself in and go, right, I that's my aim, but there are other strands or other factors within that could come into play here?
Yeah, I mean, that was a massive thing for me. I don't think I'd be doing what I was doing now if I just stuck to what I should have done or what was on my job description as an intern, because interns came and went before me that did a really great job at doing all the academy stuff, doing the internship stuff, and then they went on and did other things, whereas I quickly realized I really like it here, but I know that I'm going to have to branch out to be able to stay afterwards, because obviously they're not just going to extend an internship. There's going to be somebody else after. So I think it was so important for me to just take those opportunities. It was like what I said when I was at uni, just doing random bits and pieces that I like with the darts, for example. It's not something I was interested in, but actually then you meet contacts, then you find out that you might have different skills that you haven't been able to explore before. And so that was really important for me to be able to get to where I am now, is just, not boxing myself in and just trying different bits. You might not be great at it, but at least you've tried it and you know not to pursue that in future. So, yeah.
How daunting, though, is it for you when you do it for real? You talk about uni and you're kind of doing things, practicing, rehearsing, if you like, for the real thing. What happens when you do it for real? How much of an adrenaline rush, how much more of a buzz do you get from that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's definitely that. It's that buzz and that rush of I'm actually doing it, and you think back to, oh, I've always wanted to do this and now I'm doing it. But there's also that added pressure of, right, I can't mess this up now because this could go somewhere. So this is your sort of first step as such, where you're like, right, I've got to make an impact. So it's even in terms of just relationships with people at work, being helpful, being enjoyable, nice to be around, chatting to people. Like, I don't think you can play that down, because as important as it is that you're actually doing the job you're meant to in the role, being personable and relatable and somebody that people like being around is also really important, because then they'll remember you and think, oh yeah, actually I really liked working with so and so, let's see if we can get them on this or something else. They'll be more willing to help you in the future as well.
So social skills very important, but also
Social skills,
listening,
yeah.
a very important thing. The fact that you're taking advice, your sounding boards are around you, and you're saying to people, "What do you think about this?" You're actually getting
Yeah.
decent feedback, which allows you then to take it on another stage.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important not to, in terms of taking criticism, people are only doing it because they're helping you, and all these people around you have got all this experience that you can feed off, so you can just literally be like a sponge and just soak it all up. So like particularly at City, I found I was just surrounded by, I'd gone from being at uni to then doing a couple of freelance bits and pieces where I was working from home, to then being in this environment where I was surrounded by literally the best of the best. So the best editors, the best writers, the most incredible photography team. And it was just so eye-opening to just be surrounded by these people. It's like, right, let's just ask them questions. I'm just fascinated to just find out what I'm doing now. I was asking them all about how they got there, what they did, and it's just completely invaluable to soak up all that they know. And just being humble and not, if somebody says, oh, actually this isn't quite right, or actually we need to do this, don't get upset at that. Just take it on as I got told I did so much stuff wrong when I first started, but I wasn't upset by it. I just used it as a like, oh, right, perfect. Well, I'll try this next time. And then using, like you say, a sounding board was really, really helpful.
What did you think when you saw yourself back on camera for the first time?
Hated it. I remember that I did it so many times. I must have done about 20 takes for my first. It was only on a phone. I'm literally stood in the corner of a stand at Palace. I must have done about 20 takes, and oh my god, my teeth look like this and that. Oh god, I said this word funny. Oh, I said this too fast. But it's funny to look back, and now I can look back, because I think, particularly if anybody was interested in presenting, it's just about being yourself, and then it makes it so much easier for you, because you're not then having to, right, I'm about to do this, put on this act or this front that you've then got to keep up. So I think being really sort of true to yourself and being you, so you're not having to pretend every time you do your job, is a must. Yeah.
The way I describe it, having worked in broadcasting for a long time, broadcasting is an extension of yourself. It's not you being somebody else. It's basically you taking yourself out to another level, because you're obviously, to a certain extent, a little bit theatrical, because you're projecting. You don't present the way you talk, do you, in normal life? So it's kind of trying to explain that phenomenon, if you like. It's being an extension of yourself without becoming somebody else.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's why I do, if I make little mistakes where I say something funny, or if something comes out, but if I'm screaming as a goal goes in, because I am like just celebrating along with the fans, just keep it in there, because it just makes you so much more relatable. It's like, you just think, as somebody watching TV, watching people on social media, am I going to watch someone who's super polished and that you can tell is almost scripted, or am I going to watch someone who is a bit like me at a game, that, yeah, that's exactly what I'm like? It's just that sort of personable element, I think, is really important. Like you say, that extension of yourself.
The difference, though, between being even-handed, if you were working for Sky Sports or BBC Sport and having to report equally on both teams, you don't have to do that. Your dynamic is very different. So how did you find that? Well, imagine all the stuff you did at Salford as well. You've got to balance this up, and you've got to make sure it's 50-50 and all this kind of stuff. That's something now you don't have to do.
No, and I actually love it. And I think I'd find it really difficult now going to somewhere where you would have to be unbiased, because I mean, I knew that I wanted, like I said to you, I was sort of Sky Sports, BBC, just in my mind all the time, particularly being up at Media City. But I did a 2-week work experience at Manchester United while I was in my third year. And I realised I mean, like I said, I'm not a United fan, but from just being in there and seeing the way they worked and how they worked leading up to a game, it then made me realize that I want to work in-house. I think this is a really fun way to work. The way that content is created in that way and how they come up with ideas, I just really enjoyed. So I thought, right, okay, maybe this is something I want to do. I want to go and work at a club, or whether it was Premier League or lower league, whatever. I just knew that I wanted to work in-house somewhere. But that's what I love about City, that it's just everything's City centric, and you can just, and obviously it's lucky with City because they usually winning, so you can really then go off with some really great ideas and pieces of content based just solely on them, and you're not having to even think about the other team, which is, yeah, I personally, that's one of the best things about it.
What are the biggest changes you've seen in social media from your internship to now?
Oh, it's changed a lot. Just in terms of, I mean, there's new platforms. Like I say, when I first started out, we were using Snapchat as one of our main things. That's now not really a thing. When it comes to us, it doesn't have as big following as like Instagram now has grown a ridiculous amount. Twitter's using slightly different ways. There's now TikTok. So it's just the change and how we behave on the platforms as well. Particularly with like the extra followings, we've grown quite a lot in the last few years. But yeah, it's just, but it's changing all the time. So this time next year, there could be a new platform, or something might not be as big as it was last year. Yeah, so it's constantly changing, which is exciting.
Which takes me on to some of your questions. Thank you, by the way, to all of you who have put questions in for Abi today. We've some very good ones. I know some of them have been run past you already. So kind of making it tie up with what we just talked about. Antonio says, what strategies do you use to engage fans on social media?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the biggest thing for us, is that's what we do, what we aim to do every single day, is it's the engagement for us, is we want to engage those fans. So it's about thinking, and I think it's really useful as well. I do this constantly, that I think, would I like that? Would I watch it as somebody on my own personal social media platforms? Am I going to sit there and watch this video? Am I going to engage with this graphic? Does that copy resonate with me? So I think engagement is at the forefront constantly, and I think not being complacent in thinking, well, we've done this every Tuesday for the past year, so this is just how we do it. It's constantly trying to think of new ideas, new ways of getting people involved and engaged in your content. So just constantly thinking, looking at what other people are doing, how can we adapt that to make it fit with us, or how can we do that but better? And also, I mean, it's near impossible to do, but thinking ahead as well. So thinking what might work in the future as well.
What is your target audience then?
It's completely different for every single platform. Each platform has different audiences, different age groups. And also we're obviously global. I think this was one of the questions as well about global audience, because obviously all of our channels, so they just at Man City, is global. So a following there, it goes out to everyone. But we do have localized channels as well. So we've got a great international team full of producers that produce localized content for different countries and regions, which as well, it is really important. And obviously there's something that might resonate with fans in one country, might not with another. You've obviously got different holidays and things as well. Like just an example, even from the last week, so obviously we had Thanksgiving in the US last week. If we're putting on global, it's not really going to resonate with our whole global audience. But if we can localize that to the US and use Zach Steffen making some Thanksgiving food and stuff, it then is going to do a lot better and engagement wise if we put it on the US account than if we do putting it on the global account. So yeah, it's important to include those.
This might take quite a bit of answering, so I'll give you as long as you want. Why is social media important?
Oh my goodness. Right. For me, when I think of social media and I think of what it is for Man City, it is a window into the club. Obviously, it's different for different companies and brands, but for us, I think it bridges that gap between the fans and our teams. So yeah, you might see them on TV and you watch the game, or you might go to the games, but we're giving you that added insight and window, and we're bringing you closer. We're involving you in everything we do, and we're reaching out to you directly on your phone. It's literally just the club and the fan having that connection just through a piece of content, which I think is really important. So that it's, I know you said it might be quite a long-winded answer, but actually in my head, it's quite simple in that sense.
Okay. How would you say, this is a question that's come from Tom Kalis at Wembley, how would you say managing the social media channels of a big club differs from a smaller club? You've not been to a smaller club, so I don't suppose you know, but you must talk to other clubs about how they do their business.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've done little bits at Curzon Ashton and at Salford, so I have been at other clubs for sort of days or two, but it's that global element, I said so, and also with City, which is a group, so City Football Group, and it is a bigger brand. There's a lot more to take into consideration in terms of partnerships and content that we do for partners and sponsors, but also in terms of being a bigger brand. So something that maybe like Shrewsbury Town could do and have a joke with or a laugh with, we have to think a little bit more carefully because it's going out to a much, much bigger audience. And we've just got to take that extra step, I think, in just thinking, is this right for the brand and the club? And especially with social media, something can be, even if you delete it a second after you've posted it, or if you make a mistake and you delete it a second after you do it, somebody's already seen it and screenshot it. It's just because of how many people, like we've got nearly 30 million on Instagram, got like 11, 12 million on Twitter, 50 million odd on Facebook. So it's just somebody is going to have seen it because people have notifications on their phone for our content. So it's just that added element of like, right, we need to just take an extra step or have an extra pair of eyes on it just because it's going to be picked up more than it probably would do for a lower league club.
How then, let's bring it back to current day and something that's current and topical. How does Manchester City, with your global reach, deal with rainbow laces?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that's really important and that I've been involved in every year since I've come. It's the club support the campaign as a whole, which is a fantastic campaign to get involved with, and we always do. So that is something with a global audience, we want to support that globally. That's not just for one country or another. It's something we would want to share as the voice at Man City to get across our feeling and our support as a club. So things that we've done over the past week, we change our avatars as well on all our social channels to include the rainbow colours. We've done pieces of content with different players and put that out across our main channels. So yeah, we're sort of really clear and we work really closely with our comms team as well to make sure we're supporting and showing our support in the right ways on those.
How do you deal with, and you know this because you must have encountered it, some of the backlash from certain parts of the world you might get because of that?
Yeah, we have a zero tolerance for any abuse online, whether it's a certain group of people, a certain community. So we personally don't tolerate that. So we make sure if we do get any comments that might be, so like with the rainbow laces, you say if there are any homophobic comments, I would report those tweets and I'd hide or delete them off our post because I don't want people coming to our channels like say the whole point of the campaign is football is for everyone. I don't want somebody coming to our channels thinking that or seeing something being upset, offended and targeted by a certain person. I don't want them thinking that we support that or we are okay with that. So I would, absolutely get rid of that off our channels.
Because you will have seen some of the things that Jordan Henderson's had in terms of reaction to him as Liverpool's captain last week. Who would be the Manchester City equivalent? Who would be your kind of champion for that? Who would you put front and centre of that campaign?
I mean, it depends completely on, like we say, it's the captains which do it. What I've talked about with the content we've just created, our women's team are massive advocates of it. Steph Horton's brilliant and has done a lot of campaigning on it as well. Demi Stokes and Jill Scott. So, I mean, all of our players would get involved with something like that. But I think, particularly, and I've enjoyed doing content over the past couple of years with the likes of Steph, and I think as England captain as well, her voice is really important.
Arjun's given us a question. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. How do you ensure your TikTok posts are engaging? And what does TikTok, which audience does TikTok reach that maybe the other ones don't?
Yeah, it's a much, much younger audience on TikTok. I personally love it, to be honest. I'm not sure what you guys are all thinking, but I'm constantly on it before I go to bed, but I justify it because I'm doing research for work. But yeah, it's a much younger audience, and you could be a lot more playful on the platform. There's stuff that you'd be able to put on TikTok that you wouldn't be able to get away with putting on Twitter or Instagram. So yeah,
cheekier.
yeah, a little bit cheekier. You can sort of push the boundaries a little bit more. That we're not putting anything wild on there, but it's in terms of, I mean, a lot of it with TikTok is the sounds and trends on there. So making sure that we're keeping on top of the trends, which are constantly changing, coming in and out, seeing a sound that's being used loads and seeing and thinking like, right, what could we do that could incorporate some of our players or something we've already, even archive footage we've already got, and then incorporate it into that sound or make an edit to do that. But again, it's like what I said earlier, that I think in terms of making engaging on TikTok, like, would I like it? Would I just scroll straight past it, or is it going to hook me in and make me laugh? Because that's predominantly what TikTok is. So yeah, that's pretty much ours. And we're making sure we're posting on there every single day, because it's really important. The platform's growing so much. So just making sure that we're constantly keeping on it and making sure we're including in those trends.
How much do you keep across the content of other clubs to see what they're doing? Go, well, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, just the department as a whole, I think it's normal to be looking around at, you're playing them day in, day out. So when you're playing a particularly big game, if it's a final or something, you're going to look at what they're doing compared to ours. But yeah, we keep across, looking at our sort of main, the sort of top 10, we say we look across. But it's just good as like so what I used to do personally when I first started out and I was creating Instagram stories, I would watch Match of the Day, and then every single team that I was seeing on Match of the Day at the same time that the game was showing, I would go onto their Instagram and I'd just tap through and see what they did for their Instagram story. Not necessarily judging, stealing idea, anything like that, but just having that awareness of like, oh right, so they're now only using maybe static graphics. Okay, they've used images, but this club have only used videos. This club have posted 15 slides. This club's only posted 1. And so just being across that, I think, is helpful, and just for own personal ideas, development, and just awareness, really.
Okay, Sam Richards, also based at Wembley, says, how have you found it being a female in the male-dominated industry? Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And yeah, it is still a male-dominated industry. I think it will be for still quite a while. That it's made, I mean, we're seeing obviously a lot of like Alex Scott now, seeing her presenting on TV, and I think we are making steps. I personally, in my own workplace, so at City, I've never felt, oh my goodness, I'm a woman surrounded by a load of men, because there are such brilliant women that work at the club. So just for example, our lead photographer is a woman. We've got a women's editor. We've got brilliant women all across the business. So I've never felt, or nobody's ever treated me like, oh, well, because you're a woman, you can do that. Or it's never, ever been like that. It's just brilliant. I've just felt like I slotted straight in. The only time when I feel it the most, it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's when I go to games and I sit in a press box and I'm covering a game and I'll look around and I just like, I'm surrounded by 40 men and I'm the only woman. And it's really, but it's only sort of, you'll probably notice like halfway through the game when you're sort of like looking around for something, you're like, oh my God, wow. Like, I can't believe this is still a thing. And I remember it was in my sort of first year when I was an intern. I was traveling to a men's game down south, and I was sat across and I'm sat in all my City gear, and the guy across from me said like, oh, are you going to the game today? And I said, oh yeah. And he was like, oh, like big fan or whatever. And I said, oh, I actually work there. I'm going to cover the game. He went, wow. He went, you're brave. I thought, why? Like, would you, if there was a 22-year-old man sat across from you in his City gear and he told you he was going to work it, would you tell him he was brave? Probably not. So it's just that sort of, it's still getting rid of that initial shock. It's like, oh right, oh wow, you're working in Premier League football, okay, fine. It's just a bit of that sort of realization. But again, I've never experienced it or never felt like I couldn't do something or that it was off limits. But yeah, I think
well, okay, just picking up on that point, do you feel that maybe football's lagging a little bit behind other sports in that respect?
Maybe, but I don't see what's behind the scenes at other sports, so I don't know, because again, in our backroom staff, we've got a lot of women working within the backroom team that you might not just because they're not front facing all that, because actually in our office there are a lot of women that work in there. So yeah, I don't think I can really say whether it is or not just because I'm not behind the scenes at other places.
Okay. Reese Cornwall has asked a question. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but maybe we'll to wrap things up more generally. How easy or difficult is it to moderate what goes up on the team's social pages?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm across it like all day, every day. We have a team of 3 producers who are all posting day in, day out, but I keep across all channels and check in of what's going. I create a schedule each day of what should be going out on each platform, just a rough guide. So it's difficult because it's 24 hours, and that's part of the, and that's the part of the beauty of it, but it's also difficult because something could happen overnight. And obviously I can't be across it all the time, but I try to be as much as I can. It also makes it a little bit hard to switch off because you're constantly checking Instagram, checking Twitter. Has this gone up? Does that look okay? What comments has this had? But yeah, it's a task, but I think if you enjoy it, then it takes away that sort of feeling of like, having to trawl through it, because it's just sort of you're interested in seeing how it's doing, how fans are reacting. Because like we said, going back to that engagement side of it, you want fans to be engaged and enjoying the content. So you just want to check up on that kind of stuff. So it's difficult because of the volume of fans and the followers that we have. But yeah, we've got a team of us that keep across it, so it's not too hard.
How do you deal with contentious issues then? If something hits the papers or something becomes very media oriented in terms of people picking up all over the place and, got a bit of a damage limitation thing to do here. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, again, it's a real team effort. It's not just a case of the social team are just sat there trying to battle or deal with something or work out what to do. We've got a really good team in place, management team. We consult with each other. I'd speak to the content team, content speak to City TV. We're constantly in contact with our comms team. So it's just a case of that communication, and then it's a real team effort on that side of things.
Good. Okay. Is the job what you expected it to be? This is Joe Hopewell's question. Is the job what you expected it to be, or are there any things that really caught you off guard during your time there?
Nothing that's caught me off guard. I think, like I say, when I'm going back to sort of uni, starting out as an intern, I never sort of planned to like, oh, I will be the social, or like my main goal is to be the social media manager. But I think from sort of an outside perspective, people constantly will say to like, oh, how did you do that? Or like, oh, you're so lucky you've got my dream job, that kind of thing, which is, it's hard to explain to people that it's not just tweeting out or putting some things on Instagram. There's a lot more to it in terms of sort of the strategy, the planning behind it. And also, while it is absolutely amazing, I think people forget as well that it's like you're working very, very unsociable hours, because you work like tonight, I'm going to Villa. So I'll be out this evening, working this weekend, because obviously games at the weekends. We've got 4 teams that we cover. We've got 18s, EDS, the women's and the men's. So there's at least 4 games going on a week. So there's a lot to it that I think not that took me off guard, but might take others off guard when you think of like actually the volume. It's not just the men's team playing once or twice a week and putting out stuff for them. There's a much bigger picture that maybe people don't see because it's all behind the scenes, and that's how it's meant to be. You're meant to be there and enjoy the content and just be consuming it rather than thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, that's probably that.
How do you deal with international weeks?
International week, so I think everyone's like, oh, you're off this week. It's not like that. The international breaks are actually a bit of a chance to sort of catch our breath a little bit, just have a bit of a pause and a think about, okay, and during, it's fair to say that obviously during the men's international break, the women's team is still playing, and during the women's international break, the men's team is still playing. So there's never a week where there's just no football. That's just not a thing. So yeah, it's a time for us to pause and just reflect what's coming up, what have we done, what do we need to get ready for, and just sort of get everything organised again and reset, ready for when full teams are back and you can start up again. So yeah, it's not a case of I just then sit up with my feet up for a week. It's still quite busy, but then we also cover the internationals. So when we have a lot of our players playing for their countries, so we're then covering those games in the evening and then doing roundups of whether they've had any involvement in the games, what they played, how they're doing, World Cup qualification, that kind of thing. So we're still covering those as well.
And May to August, when there is a bit of a lull, where there's no active football to talk about?
Yeah, again, while there isn't any particular moments going on, there's a lot to reflect on. We build up a lot of stuff during the season that we think, right, we'll save this for summer. A lot of it, again, is covering what our players are doing. It's obviously a bit quieter, but a lot of it is planning and prepping ahead of the next season. So we'll be looking at what our graphics are going to look like next season, how we're going to approach social, what we're going to look to do differently, what should we keep. So while it might be a bit quieter in terms of posting, there's still that element of planning and prep that goes into it.
Jordan Clark, we may have stolen your thunder a little bit on this question, but I'll put it anyway because I'm sure that you can elaborate on it a bit more. He says a lot of football social media accounts have started to become more humorous recently. What rules do you have to obey when make sure that jokes don't go too far?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. And actually, sort of in the past, we've been sort of one of the bigger clubs that have led on making those jokes, having a bit of fun, and we still try to where we can. If we see a trend or something that we can get involved in that fits and that is right, we'll absolutely do it. But there's again that case of communication, just getting extra eyes on it, checking, saying oh, thinking about doing this, what do you think? And then if somebody's like, oh, not sure about that, that's when we're like, okay, right, let's review this and let's have a think. Because like saying about the bigger clubs, we have to think about who we're representing. So obviously when you think of ownership and stuff, you just want to think, right, we're not just throwing something out on social for fun. We're talking as Man City here. This is the voice of the club. So we need to just make sure that what we're doing tonally is right. And also we're never going to be putting anything out there that's, if it's a joke, it's not going to offend anyone. It's not going to upset anyone. It's all got to be in jest and stuff that can be taken. It's lighthearted. So we do try to get involved, and I think City, we're quite good at sort of, there's a line and sometimes we dance on it a little bit with putting out fun little bits, maybe tongue-in-cheek sometimes. But no, I think, yeah, it's really important to just make sure that sort of people are aligned, and that no one's ever just going to throw something out and it be on that one person. It would always be a discussion or something that's been had.
Have you ever done something you think a great idea and you put it together and you're just about to put it up online and go, actually, I'm not sure about this after all, and you've pulled it and gone, no, we need to either redo it or better chuck that idea out, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, not anything that a real example that springs to mind, but we certainly do that a lot, where it'll be like, oh, we're going to put this out, and actually when we come to do it, it's like this, either whether it doesn't fit in tonally, particularly with if we had certain content planned for a certain day and maybe the day before we'd lost, or it'd been we'd been winning and then they'd scored in the last minute and we'd drawn. Then if we had a really piece of funny, humorous content ready to go the next morning, it's not going to land very well. So it's actually more of just rejigging and rethinking of when content might suit best, and just having that awareness of, okay, this is happening at the moment, so probably best not to use this, or that kind of element, rather than just completely saying scrapping that.
Michael Troyes has got a question for you. How does Manchester City integrate their men's and women's social media, open brackets, to create a closer community, question mark?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite things I've been involved in. So back in, I think it must have been 2018 now, the club created a campaign called Same City, Same Passion, where we used to, about 4 years ago, we had separate men's, women's, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. Everything was separate, and we posted women's stuff on the women's accounts, whatever. But now, and after that campaign, we made the decision that it's just City. It's not Man City women. It's not Man City men's team. It's just Man City. That's what it is. So actually, if you're coming to the Man City page, you should be looking at Man City news, whether it's about Fernandinho or Steph Horton or whoever. So we integrated our Instagram pages. So we now post all of our women's content alongside with the men's content, which was previously on there. Same with Twitter. So anything day to day, so anything that's not a match day, we will put women's content on the men's, or what was originally the men's channel, but we call it the global channel. So like yesterday with Ellen White scoring for the Lionesses, becoming the record England goal scorer, that's going all on just the Man City account. But we do have a separate at Man City Women account just for matches specifically, because there's a lot of times where they play at the same time. So we use it just for match commentary, because otherwise it could get really, really confusing if you're tweeting about women's team scoring and then the men's team half time, and then it looks a little bit disjointed. So it's something we've made a real conscious effort to include. And that's what I love, that we just treat the men's and the women's teams exactly the same. And I like something I'm really proud of and proud to be involved in.
Have you had any backlash to that?
Occasionally you do, not at the beginning, perhaps just because people didn't understand maybe quite why we were doing it, or you get fans who are only following the men's team, which is fine, but then like, oh, well, why are you showing me this? I don't want to see that. And it's like, well, if you're a Man City fan, this is the place for Man City news. So this is where it's going to be. Like, we're not going to be saying, oh, if you need this, or oh, I'm sorry about it. It's like, this is how we feel. This is our club. This is the city that we love. So this is how we're going to do it.
No drop down menu or anything like that.
No, exactly. But yeah, we're there's been a couple of times where like if somebody's made like a real comment, it depends sort of if I've been in a sort of what mood I'm in. But sometimes people, if they can be really nasty about us posting some women's content, I'll just post something really simple and dry back saying, this is the Twitter page for at Man City, where you find news on all Man City teams. And that just give them a really blanket sort of, this is what it is. And it's just not saying anything nasty, not saying to them, oh, well, you know where to go. It's just making it really clear to fans why we're doing it, that it's for Man City news. So yeah,
do you keep across the individual Twitter accounts or Instagram accounts of the City players? And advise them perhaps sometimes?
Yeah, to be honest, we keep across it in terms of just because if they're posting stuff about the game or posting anything engaging or engaging with each other, we obviously like to interact with that. So we like to repost it or maybe get involved, reply to it. So we keep across it in that sense, but we're not saying what they're going to say. It's up to them what they post. But we're just sort of there to sort of support them. And like we've got an Edison documentary going out at the moment. So the second episode was previewed yesterday. So then I worked with Edison and his team to say, right, I'm going to put the trailer out. I'm going to put it on Instagram as a collaboration rather than just tagging him. So then he reshared it on his page. So it's sort of in that approach we work with them, but we don't obviously control what they say.
Right. No, I'm sure you don't. But if they step out of line, whose job is it then to bring them back in line? So it's not yours, I take it. Okay. Harrison Derling says, how do I stand out from the crowd and put myself in a better position to get a work placement or a job? Yeah, I think, and that's the thing. Work experience and just doing it doesn't have to be a 3-week long placement somewhere. It could be a day, it could be an afternoon, could be an hour of your time going somewhere. But I think work experience and getting contacts in a whole variety of different, whether it is sports you want to work in, whatever the industry. So for me, it was doing lots of little random bits and pieces. And also like a lot of them, you have to obviously volunteer, you're doing them for free, but being helpful. You want to go in to somewhere and you want to help them and make their life easier. Because if you're doing something so for example, like when I used to be an intern, I'd say to like my manager at the time, he'd have a whole interview and I'd be like, do you want to send me that interview and I'll transcribe it for you? He'd be like, oh yeah, because you know how busy like these people are. And it's like, actually, yeah, that is going to take me a little while and it's added onto my day, but they'll remember that and remember that I've made their job a little bit easier. And so again, it's like, oh, well, yeah, Abby's been really helpful because she did this for me yesterday. And actually, okay, we've got this on tomorrow. Should we ask if Abby wants to go and do it? Because
that will resonate with somebody. If you're helpful and you make their life easy, they're going to want you around. If you're just sat there waiting for somebody to come over and give you stuff to do, or if you're on work experience, you're sort of sat there like, oh, what would you like me to know? Be super proactive. That's the thing for me, just making the move to them and asking what you can do rather than sitting there and waiting for them to say, can you do this? I think is a really good way to stand out and will set you apart. Because if you've got exactly the same degree as someone, you've done pretty similar work experience and you've got pretty similar skill set, if that person sat and waited to be given stuff, but you've been proactive and asked for it, that one question could set you apart from that other person and make them invite you back as opposed to the other person. So I think that's a massive thing.
And never say, I won't make the teas or coffees.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there wasn't really much of that. I was expecting as an intern, you think, oh, I'm just going to be making teas and coffees. I hardly ever made a cup of tea or coffee at City when I first started. So that wasn't even, we ended up having a hot drink roulette where everyone who wanted a cup of tea would put their name in and then we'd do it on a generator and then whoever it landed on had to go make all the teas and coffees, which is a much fairer way of doing it.
It is. Lewis Scott, kind of carrying on from that last answer, if you could give one piece of advice on how to pursue your career to be a social media manager, what would it be?
Yeah, again, it's that opportunities. Just I've only got to where I am now from taking every opportunity that came to me or that I went for. So anything that presented itself, rather than sitting back and be like, oh well, I'm in the content team, so I'm not gonna help with that social thing. I'll stay with what I'm doing. It's that idea of being boxed in again. I think just taking opportunities, no matter how far out of your comfort zone it is, or how well you think it, just take it and be like, yeah, I'll come along to that. Yep, I'll help with that. And just making sure that again, it's that idea of helping, it's that idea of being proactive, and just not keeping yourself to thinking, oh, this is the path and this is how I get here, because there's no set way. Like people in our departments have come from all different backgrounds. Some have gone to uni, some haven't. A lot of started out from City and worked their way up. Others have been elsewhere and then moved across. People have moved across teams to work their way up. It's not as simple as starting at the bottom of the ladder and climbing up. Sometimes you've got to go sideways and diagonally to then get to a certain place, because it'll then take you a lot longer to progress if there's only one step, if you only keep seeing one step above you as like, okay, this is my next step, because it can come from any direction. So I think just making sure that you're keeping your options open, keep your mind open, and just be prepared to, I know it sounds awful, but just being prepared to like be really busy. It sounds mad, but it doesn't matter if you're working 7 days a week or you go straight from I used to go straight from my retail job to go and help out at something to do with journalism or media straight after. And at the time it was like, oh gosh, this is really a lot and it's tiring, but it's now, I'm able to look back now and be like, oh, really like proud of myself for putting myself out there at that time. It then pays off in the long run. So where you might be putting yourself out there and doing extra bits and pieces and it feels like you're just sort of treading water at time, it then will pay off in the long run and you can feel really like grateful and proud of yourself for doing it. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Bob.
Sorry, I turned it off to have a cough, so I wasn't coughing in your ear, but I'm back again.
That's okay.
You've seen such an evolution in social media in the time you've been there. Where's it going next? What do you think the next innovation is going to be?
That's the best thing about it. I couldn't possibly say this is what is going to happen with social, because you can't ever predict what it's going to look like. So even like short-term things, obviously most people are probably aware just from being on their own social accounts that video is a lot more prevalent, particularly now on Instagram. So which used to be a real sort of like photo, beautiful pictures platform, is now moving into being a video platform, and a lot of them are doing that. But I think that's the most exciting thing for me, is that in a year's time there could be something completely different that we're working on, talking about, starting up, and that's sort of the beauty of it, really.
And what about your future? I mean, it seems very secure now, but I'm sure you're a person who wants to move on or certainly branch out maybe into other areas. Do you have any targets or anything particular in line in a 5-year scale, 10-year scale, whatever?
No, and again, like, I always say it because that's like the dreaded question for me. I like when people used to ask in like job interviews and stuff, like, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Again, if you want to work in this industry, I don't think you can answer that question, because if you're saying, oh, this is what I want to do, So when I was back at uni, in 5 years time, I want to be a presenter on it. But it's like, now that to me that's absolutely not what I want to do or where I'd want to be. But equally, you could target to work in social media, but then there might be different areas or elements of the industry that begin to grow in the part, like graphic design is obviously huge, that you can, it doesn't have to be that, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to get there. For me, I mean, I've done this in a relatively short amount of time. So I was an intern 4 years ago. So in that 4 years, I've gone from intern, content executive, social media producer to social media manager. So actually, I'm good at the moment with this. It's a lot more of it's a lot bigger role and a lot more that sort of I want to shape and do. So I'm good for this now. But who knows where I might move back into content, might move back more into written stuff. Like there's the comms and PR side, which is obviously bigger. But like I couldn't possibly say where I'd want to be in 5 or 10 years time. But at the moment, like I'm really enjoying and thriving off being in social media and loving the football. So yeah, this is me for now.
And if there's a student or several students at the Etihad or Wembley who are thinking about pursuing the same role as you and applied for a job and you're going to interview them, what would you be looking for?
Yeah, I get literally everything of it. That enthusiasm, I don't think can be not, because if somebody comes and sits across from you and is sort of sat like slumped in a chair, like super quiet, I want someone to come in who is really buzzing and excited by it and sees it as an opportunity, not, okay, right, I'm now having my interview. It's like, no, this is you already sat here, so this you've already got to the hard part, your CV, and that's the difficult bit of getting there. It's just about making an impression of like, would I personally, you've just got to think as well, like, would I want to work with you? Like, we're going to be working together, so you want to build a relationship straight from meeting that person, straight from the handshake, the eye contact. I know people always say that kind of thing, but yeah, really selling yourself, but in a way that's personable and makes me think, right, this person's got something here that we'd be able to work with together. But yeah, I think also not to be discouraged when you don't hear back or you do get rejections. When I left uni, I think I must have applied for about 150 jobs that were all graduate schemes, freelance bits. I probably heard back from maybe 30 of those. The rest of them, I didn't even get a response. The 30 that I did hear back from all said no. So you're just sat and you're thinking, you just think, what do I do now? Like, how can I possibly give any more? And it is that element of like, if they just met me, I think they'd realize that I'd be able to do it. But it's your CV, your cover letter doing that sort of first step for you. But then when I got that email from City to say, like, I would like to invite you for an opportunity for an interview, I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, finally. And this is not only have I heard something back that's positive, but this could like be the start now. So I just have absolutely got to nail this. So yeah, it's just being patient, not expecting to suddenly come out, graduate on one day, and then the next day you're going to be starting off as social media manager the next day. It takes time and patience, but yeah, I'd just say just don't be discouraged, because I cannot tell you how many letters of thanks but no thanks or silence that I got. So
I'm sure you thought about that interview that you had at City many, many times. What do you think was the clinching factor? Was there one thing that you did during the interview going, yes, I've nailed it there, that's given me a good chance to potentially get this job?
I think it was probably, it's a personality thing for me, because I was very open and honest, because I knew that they'd had a couple of other people in that had already done something kind of similar before and had worked at clubs and done something really similar on like a placement rather than actually a full internship. So I was just really honest with them that there were areas that I lacked in, but it was just making it really clear to them that the reason I'm here is because I really want to develop. I want to be better. This is what I've noticed from what you do. I love that you do this, and that's what I want to learn. So making it as much of like, not sitting there and being like, I know it all and I'll do this for you. It's also about what they can give to you and making it making them see that how enthusiastic and how up for a challenge you are, and seeing how determined you are. Because if you're sat there and actually being a little bit more honest and humble and open and exposing yourself almost to say, I'm not the finished article here, but then they will, it's nice because then you can be almost like a project there, that if you think of me starting there, I hadn't even done that much writing, but then was able to develop my skills in writing, then mold into this and mold into that. So it's just about how you sort of present yourself, and just making sure you're not sort of going there being like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. Also be really honest about what, not just saying, oh, I can't do this, but this is where I want to develop, this is what I want to do. So I think that's really important too.
And how important is it to know about the club or the company or whichever person's interviewing you about, where you potentially going to be working?
Oh, so important, because I mean, I didn't go in there being like, oh, I can rattle off every single player from the 18 to the first team and men's and women's, all their names and numbers. Like it's not a case of that, in terms of it's just being aware of being across what they do already, highlighting things that you really like that they do, and maybe highlighting a few things that you think, oh, actually they could maybe do this that I would be able to help with. So giving them maybe a problem, but offering them the solution that you've already thought about, but then also massaging the ego a little bit. Like, I love how you do this. This is something I, as a follower, as a fan, as an like user, really enjoy what you guys do. And it's just because if you come across and sit across, and it's really obvious when you can tell that somebody hasn't done their research and doesn't look at your content. It's very, very obvious. So I don't think I wouldn't be like testing people on their Man City knowledge and what they know, but I think certainly just on their awareness of what we already do, I think is really important.
Yeah. By the way, here's your Man City Kahoot for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to finish with the most difficult question in our 58 minutes that we've had so far. What's the score going to be tonight?
Oh, do you know what I think? I don't think people are going to think it's as easy as it is. I reckon 2-1 to City, I think.
No, it comes to the.
You've heard it here first.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm terrible at predictions.
I've written that down too. Well, when it's 2-1 tonight, I'll remember this conversation.
Yeah,
and
I'm notoriously bad with predictions. Like in our department, it's always, if I guess one thing, it's completely the opposite. So I stopped even bothering to predict and do that on the Instagram story. So yeah, we'll see. 2-1 maybe.
And have you started to think about the content if Manchester City wins the Premier League this year?
We've always got it in the back of our mind. Not necessarily. I don't think you can plan, because there's still such a huge chunk of the season to go. So we couldn't possibly say like, this is what we would do now, because there might be something mad that happens in March. There might be a crazy race towards the end. Like, you've got no idea where it's going to go. So you can't prepare this early on, unfortunately. Like, as much as we like to plan and prepare for things and campaigns, if we know the anniversaries are coming up and stuff, you just cannot plan for something like a Premier League win or a Champions League like early on.
But you're a confident person. How confident are you that City are going to get over the line this year?
Oh gosh, I wouldn't like to say. I'm always confident in them, to be honest. The amount of times they've sort of turned around. I mean, I've been very fortunate in the 4 years I've been there, that it's just been like the most ridiculous season. So you had like the Centurions, the Formidables, and there's been like so much success that I constantly believe in them anywhere. But I wouldn't like to say.
Abi, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. It's nearly an hour we've put together.
I know, it's gone so quickly.
With all of your answers, and they've all been great and hopefully very instructive and very illustrative for people who are going to be leaving UCFB soon, or even those who've got a couple more years here. At least they know the pathway eventually to get to what they want to see and what they want to do.
Yeah,
Abi Withey,
no problem.
Social media manager at Manchester City. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again in not too distant future.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And if there's any students that have any particular questions that didn't maybe get answered, or you've got something else you wanted to reach out about, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you need, just feel free to fire me a message if you need to. But yeah, much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff, Abi. See you again.
See you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.